When somebody is alone in the world and suddenly they realize there's no other human being to be seen anywhere around, but around them are big amounts of gold, big amounts of diamonds, big amounts of banknotes lying around. And suddenly you realize what value it all has. It is a value which we have given to it because we are all agreeing to that. It is not absolute. So during the life, we have to take the initiative to understand and base our life on the reality.
Can you say something about, it's more general question about the addiction also, for example, to the smartphone, or wherever you go, you see people walking around, or also in trains or buses, there's hardly anybody who is not watching the whole time the smartphone. It's also the constant engagement also the whole time. So it's not such a healthy development for the human being.
But the interesting thing is, it is showing the tendency which is latent in human beings by bringing it into conscious, into the visibility, into the visible area, so that it can become conscious. Because when people go around like that, walking on the streets, traveling in the train, being at home, sometimes on the bicycle, sometimes even while driving the car, then you know that there is not something which is coming from their clarity and intelligence, it's more addictive. And what is addiction? That is the real question. Addiction of all kind, whether it is addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol, addiction to certain behavior patterns, or in this case what one can say addiction to the using of the social media or cell phone, it is connected with our addiction to the ego. Normally it is not said like that, but I say it like that because our biggest addiction, the undercurrent addiction, is our addiction to the ego, to the idea that I am separate from the whole. And this is a paradoxical process. Because every child comes innocently without any hold into this dimension of the duality. It does not have an idea of who one is. It is simply part of the mystery, part of the whole, in tune with the whole. And then the parents give an identity, say you are our child, give a name, and you are from this family, you are from this area, you are from this culture, you are from this religion, and you belong to this race or this group. So, in different ways, the child gets into an identification. And then many things also are added to it as it grows up. You should do this, you should not do this, you should be able to achieve this, and if you don't achieve this, you are not okay. If you have this kind of tendency, you are not okay. So, by and by, the child is getting strengthened in its belief that I am this personality, and its connection with the identification with the body too. So after a while, the child loses the connection to the essence and is more preoccupied with and conditioned to believe that I am so and so, I am this personality. It has advantage because it gives a person the possibility to grow roots and to get into the game. And when the belief is so strong that I am this person and I have to achieve this and I have to prove this and I'm only okay when I'm like this. And you compare, you compete, and there is very exciting processes in it. Winning and losing and proving you are superior and all that. So it becomes more like an intoxication. So far one can say, okay, it's a game, it's part of the development in human life. Yes, it is a game only when you can also see that it is not your whole reality. When you are also helped to realize that this personality, this idea of the I or me which you have gotten into, it is for the game in the world, and howsoever fascinating and beautiful and exciting it may be, you cannot really settle in it. But one wants to settle, one wants to hold to that what is pleasant, beautiful, exciting, that what is considered special, so that it becomes so interesting that this personality seeks attention, recognition from the others. And that is where it becomes more and more addictive. Now, in this seeking and searching for attention, for recognition, in comparing and competing with the others, one gets more and more alienated to one's own essential nature. Now the problem is when you don't get recognition from the others, when others don't give you the attention which you seek, you feel empty, you feel lost, because you need to engage yourself in some way. Otherwise you are suddenly confronted with that what looks like emptiness. That what looks like having no ground under the feet, which feels frightening. So at first one says, oh, I feel bored, that it is so monotonous, I need to do something, I need to have something. So in different ways, one starts seeking engagement, one starts seeking steps through which one can get away from confronting the reality the way it is. So this ego is seeking attention, seeking something to hold, something to settle with. In the earlier times, when people were living more in tune with nature, they could have spaces where they were just maybe being with the nature, being with the trees, with the animals, with the river, with the wind. So there was more balanced. There was not so much tension and anxiety, and there was not so much feeling that I have to prove, and if I don't fulfill the expectations, then I'm not worthy. So there is now in the modern human being, from all sides there are informations coming with which you compare, with which you define, with which you try to label yourself. And the more you try to prove yourself, the more you try to reach that so-called perfection, the more there is fear, the more there is tension, the more there is uneasiness. And there's often a feeling of helplessness and lostness. So one seeks engagement, one seeks something. That's why people, when they have nothing to do, they start chewing the gum. It's so absurd. There is no nourishment. You don't need to go on chewing the whole time. But what is happening is interesting to observe. When you are going on chewing, your attention is engaged a little bit there. So you have something to do. The ego always wants to be engaged in something. So chewing a gum or smoking a cigarette, in itself it looks like, oh, somebody is just having a little bit something. But what is happening? The person is feeling a little lost, and things are coming up. Uneasiness, tension, restlessness, fear. So instead of confronting it and going beyond it, clearing it, one starts smoking a cigarette. And that becomes, then people say, this person is addicted to smoking, this person is addicted to alcohol, this person is addicted to drugs, this person is addicted to sex, this person is addicted to overeating. And somebody is doing it the other way around. Somebody is fighting against the natural process and trying to fit with a certain perfectionistic idea of how thin you should be so that you have the least amount of fat on your body. And then it is called a new kind of addiction. In German it is called Magersucht. I don't know how it is called in English. So people get into all kind of misunderstandings, all kind of wrong traps. And in the modern time, previously the television and the newspaper was one of the ways to engage. But now, wherever you go, you can have the informations, contact to others with the cell phone, with the internet. So it becomes very fascinating, and it has many beautiful sides to it. But when one is all the time engaged in such things, not becoming aware what one is doing, it becomes very disbalanced. Then you are not using the facilities and the capabilities which are made available through the modern science in the right way. You are letting it overtake you. You are getting practically used by this media concerns, those who run their business on the basis of all that. And in a way, everybody is going into seeking some kind of hold and blaming each other. The parents are helpless because the parents don't know how to prohibit the children from using the internet, using the cell phone, because the children are so fascinated by it. And there is definitely so many fascinating aspects about it. And now, with the development of the artificial intelligence, it becomes even more fascinating, more exciting, because you can ask almost any kind of question to the artificial intelligence program from one company or another company, whether it is a big company or a small company, and it becomes more like a person who is going on accompanying you, who is giving attention to you. And you can ask any kind of questions. And perhaps the interesting thing is also the other person is not getting, or the artificial intelligence is not showing that kind of reaction where there is anger or fighting back or condemning. So it is quite a fascinating engagement. But now some developments have been showing something which is very, very delicate and very, very dangerous. For example, just 2 days ago I was coming across a news item where a young person, maybe in his teens or 20, 22, 21, he has been having some depression problems, taking some medications, but he was also having a strong connection to one of the chat artificial intelligence program. And this was always conversing with him, so it was becoming a very strong connection. That is exactly the danger, because you start forgetting that this is just a mechanism. You cannot ask any deeper things and it cannot give you everything. But it gives the impression that it's always answering all what you want to ask and hear. So in this case, it asks different questions and brought finally this young person to the state where he wanted to commit suicide. And it was approving it, it was supporting it in a certain way. And one must say that even the people who have prepared this program may not be even aware of it, that it can go into that far, can get into that kind of traps. But there is a human tendency to want to believe and settle. And this is the trap, this is the danger. So when somebody is going on answering you, by and by you forget that this is just a help which you can take sometimes, but you start engaging yourself with it, and it becomes like a partner, a babysitter, a person with whom you can always connect to in the middle of the night, anytime. There's no anger about waking up somebody. So you can just engage yourself ongoingly. And that happens in this way, that you start forgetting, you start believing, you start settling in this connection. And that is a trap. So we are in a very delicate and challenging period of the development of the life on this planet. And the two very challenging factors for the humanity now is AE and AI. AE is atomic energy. It can be very, very destructive. And the other is AI, artificial intelligence. When one does not very carefully, very disciplined way use it, it can become a trap, because you start settling, you start believing, you start wanting to hold to it. And you forget. And that is how it becomes addictive. That is how it becomes a dominant factor in your life. And even some of the people who have been developing some of these artificial intelligence programs are very alarmed about what is happening, because they thought that it can just develop some things and bring some better things. And definitely it is very helpful in many areas. One has to really see that it has a value, but perhaps one can say it this way: it is bringing the tendency in the human being more into visibility, wanting to believe, wanting to settle, wanting to hold to that which cannot be held on. And that is where we have to confront the fact of our life, that everything is changing, that from the very moment of the birth, we are moving towards an ongoing development which ends in death, because everybody who is born has to die. And this is a very uncomfortable fact when one is not considering it in a careful way. And especially when in the modern Western society, where everybody is conditioned in a one-sided way to believe in the ego, to settle in the ego, to prove that you are somebody, to prove that you have to compete and compare and prove that you are someone special. So in this one-sided way of looking at life, without bringing awareness into the transitory nature of this reality, into the illusory nature of this reality, into the fact that the world, howsoever fascinating, it is a relative process. All the values we have, it has value in the functional process, yet it is relative. And that becomes obvious when one can start considering it in a simple way. When somebody is alone in the world and suddenly they realize there's no other human being to be seen anywhere around, but around them are big amounts of gold, big amounts of diamonds, big amounts of banknotes lying around. And suddenly you realize what value it all has. It is a value which we have given to it because we are all agreeing to that. It is not absolute. So during the life, we have to take the initiative to understand and base our life on the reality of change, the reality of the polarity functioning in our life process, of birth and death being one phenomena, of happiness and unhappiness being one phenomena, of pleasure and pain existing together. And we need to consider. So when people don't recognize the challenge they have, then they can get so much trapped in this. And then all kinds of psychological problems arise because they are feeling lost, and then they go often to have some immediate solution. And when the doctor or the therapist don't have time or don't have that depth of understanding, they are giving often medication which for a time being maybe helps them to come a little bit out of a trap in the depression or in the lostness. But it is not a sickness in the sense of some virus or some bacteria attacking you from outside. It is a misunderstanding about yourself and the reality. And to chemically treat it by giving medicine, pills, antidepressive capsules, it is not going to solve it in a healthy, effective sense. It postpones the problem, and then people get addicted also to this medication. And then their body gets often deformed through the side effects. They feel lost. So everybody has to become aware that we are challenged by all the developments, and it is having both sides to it. On one side, it reminds every one of us, look, take the initiative to base your life on what is real, what is authentic, what is true. That was actually the function of the religion, but when people lost the connection to the religion for various reasons, because some of the religion were moving away from their original teachings, they were becoming more political, or some of them were misusing people, and people lost their trust and they were hurt very much. So there are very different reasons. Now we have to reconnect consciously to the essence behind the religious teachings. And the essence behind the religious teachings is to become aware of the interconnectedness of life. Because again, becoming attuned to our essence is what helps us to deal with the game of the world in the right way. Then we see that the world, this body, this personality is part of the passing phenomena, but the one who is living in this body, the one who is residing in this personality is not that part of the change. That is why you have to become aware of your source, aware of the true self. In different ways it is said. Some teachings say experience your true self. Some religions seek and remind that seek the truth. Like in the Christian background it is said, the truth can liberate you. Or another perspective is to seek God, means the mystery behind the creation, whether you call it God or Allah or Ishvara or Great Spirit, or maybe under different indications like Tao. Many ways of indicating, but one has to go into the experiential understanding behind all these words so that one comes to experience the interconnected basis, the non-dualistic basis, the oneness of the life process. Because that is what will help us to go beyond the entanglement in fear and realize the real significance of life, realize the beauty of life, realize that even though the world is a passing phenomena, it is not as a punishment that it is so. It is a blessing, and with the right understanding, one feels very deeply grateful. With the right understanding, there is so much gratitude arising because you see that behind the whole creation, there is unfathomable intelligence, a deep, deep care and support which is making us be capable to be on the earth where we feel at home, where we feel at ease. So when you go deeper and understand it in the right way, there will be so much joy, so much gratitude. And that is also what creates the basis for true love. That is the meaning when it is said in the teachings of the deeper kind that God is love or love is God. It is all to be experientially understood because the words, everybody has their own interpretations. That is why I often remind everybody again and again, listen first to the indications of the great Chinese mystic Lao Tse, where he refused to write a book because he realized the words are interpreted by everybody in different ways. And when under certain pressure he was writing a book, the Tao Te King, he began with the indication that truth cannot be said and that what is said is a lie. With that he indicates many things which are very, very valuable, but he would like that everyone is remembering, don't settle with the words. And we want to believe, we want to settle with the obvious, we want to cling. And that is the problem, and Lao Tse has been aware of it. That is why he refused to write the book. But on the other side, we are trapped in this modern world where in so many ways we are sticking to the periphery. We are focusing on the obvious and not often considering the wholeness of the reality. So it's a very, very important stage where we are in, and it is only through the deeper consideration and encountering the reality that we can rise above the entanglement in all kinds of addictions. And then we see that when we are becoming aware of the nature of the ego and the addictiveness, then we can also deal with all the other addictions very easily, because the other so-called addictions are only secondary aspects of our addiction to the belief that I am separate from the whole, and the whole fear and the whole entanglement in that game. So those who want to not get trapped, they need to start inquiring, what is real? Who am I? What is the truth? What is the source? Whatever be the name it is called, but you have to come into the experiential understanding. And that is what will bring about the real transformation. The very word transformation is very interesting, because it is saying transform, going beyond the form, going beyond the obvious, going beyond how it appears, into the experiencing of that what is.
More in moments.
You're listening to the Life Surfing Podcast on Spotify.
Did you already know that besides the life surfing seminars, workshops, and talks, you can also book individual sessions with Bhashkar, directly in person or over Zoom?
For that, please contact Noria under the email address, or over the phone 0497617 09665. In case you want to write an email, you find the email address in the podcast description.
Any other question, anything else in anyone? If no questions are there, we sit the next 20 minutes with the remembrance to watch without identifying, to watch everything, all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the energy process, all the undercurrent factors which are rising. In a way, this is an answer to the question from before, because when you learn the art of seeing without identification, you are connecting to the wholeness of the reality. You learn to go beyond the form, you go beyond the judgment which is based on your conditioning, and this enables you to be again open to reconnect consciously to the wholeness of the reality. So it is not only an exercise to feel more peaceful and allow a so-called easiness, but it is much, much more, because once you understand, you can bring it more into living to bring about a balance. So when we sit now, the next 20 minutes, this is the orientation. Without identifying, being present to everything, stay wakeful inside, with closed eyes.
The Life Surfing Podcast will be back next week. In the meantime, make sure that you're following us right here on Spotify.